We've got a very important show today, and I'm pleased to be joined again by Sal Greco and Eric Dim. These guys are the superstars of the finest unfiltered podcast, former NYPD officers. Sal, Eric, welcome back to the show. How you guys doing?
Outstanding. Jason, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for all the work you will do on social media, and I can't thank you enough for being our friend and provide so much support on social media. I really do. Believe me, from my bottom of my heart, it's much appreciated.
My pleasure, Eric, of course. And you guys, people can watch you guys basically daily, right? On the finest unfiltered podcast. People can follow Eric at Eric Dim Cop on X. How's everything going with the finest unfiltered, Eric?
Well, it's growing. And I never expected it to morph into this manner. I retired September 2022 from the New York City Police Department as a lieutenant special assignment. I was under fire by the Civilian Complaint Review Board. I teamed up with John McCarry, who was a big voice in regards to the vaccine mandate. He stood on his religious beliefs for the NYPD. And sure enough, Sal, we befriended Sal, and Sal became a fantastic link. And together, we now formed the media channel for the finest unfiltered. So 8:05 Eastern time in the morning, we do a live show Monday through Friday. We talk about police perspective. Pretty much anything that's centric and focused around public safety, including politics, culture, New York City, nationwide, worldwide, globalist ideas. And Sal does a show at now 12:05. Sal gives a great perspective, really puts a political eye on things, and weaves in his wrongful termination for the NYPD, how he was a political target. And Jason, can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, and it's a great show. But I mean, all the work that you guys are doing, if people are interested in hearing about the details of the NYPD, I'm constantly amazed how, like you were just asking me about the green screen, and it's like the stuff that I know about visual effects is like stuff that you guys know about the inner workings of not only the NYPD, but the city and city government and some of this insane corruption we've been seeing from Eric Adams. Sal, you have been talking about this forever. People can go to salgreco.com. They can hear you on the Finest Unfiltered podcast. How are you doing, Sal?
Yeah, I'm doing good, Jason. Despite all this, the latest corruption we're seeing, I do have my own show. So the Sal Greco show, you can catch that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for now at 12:05 on the Finest Unfiltered YouTube channel, and also on the Sal Greco show Rumble channel, and on the Sal Greco show YouTube channel. I provide some clips and short videos of the episodes that I put up on the Finest Unfiltered YouTube and the previous episodes that basically was a blueprint on the indictment of one Eric Adams and the future indictments or the in jeopardy of the cronies around him. So the last 24 to 72 hours has been insane. A lot of stuff has been going on, stuff that no one thought they voted for in regards of President Donald Trump, the guy that said he was going to come in and he's going to rearrange everything and drain the swamp and tackle government corruption. And right now he's entangled in it himself because the Eric Adams case always had merits. It is not that every single prosecution is political. If you're going to use that excuse, let everyone out of jail right now for whatever they've done, because that's, this
You're
is
right.
A ridiculous argument that's being used by a guy who now you have to start saying, is this guy being a dictator? Because he wants to control not only the federal government, but New York City, because that's where he's from. And I don't know, I voted for the guy 3 times. I'm not going to say I'm throwing pom-poms from MAGA every day, but I agree with, let's say a good percentage of the policies, a lot of what he says, but there's going to be things we disagree with. I'm not a yes man, which is why you've never seen me near the guy, because you have to be a yes man to be around him. But in this instance, this could be the complete downfall of his legacy. There is no upside to what he's doing with Eric Adams. And New York City will reject this like in a resounding way. They will reject this. And there's numerous people Eric Adams has destroyed. He's destroyed their lives. He's destroyed the city. He's bankrupted the city. And I don't think even the federal government could bail them out. I mean, and I just did a whole show with John McCarry, which you could check out on the Finest Unfiltered channel. It was titled Trump's New Best Friend. and me and John break a lot of this stuff down that probably we're going to talk about today as well, because there's new details every couple hours of it.
Yeah, and I was watching a bit of that show. I didn't get to see the whole thing, but I want to talk about some of the topics that you raised. See, because I love this back and forth that we're having, because you guys talk about things. What I see developing is that sometimes, I'll share some detail with you guys, and then between your NYPD, ex-NYPD brain trust, you guys find things in there that I don't have any idea about, but it might be a document that you might not have been aware of. So we're getting a really nice volley of information going here. And so one of the things that you guys were discussing on the show this morning, Sal, that I hadn't seen before was this letter that we've been hearing about for the past 2 days. And this thing is loaded with details, caveats, fancy lawyer words like practicable, things they like to do to make other people, they want you to think they're smarter than you are. But one of the things that stood out to me right away when this first was being reported on, because I didn't see this letter right away, is that they're dismissing this without prejudice, meaning that it could be brought back later. And in our offline conversation, Sal, you shared, and I share your sort of skepticism. You said it doesn't matter, this is it, it's over. And I definitely also appreciate your frustration with this, your personal anger. I share all of that. But what I see in here are certain things, like they're saying this is all predicated on the person who actually gets confirmed and becomes not the interim U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, but this is going to go through a lot of confirmation steps, and it's not clear that Eric Adams is out of the woods. Was that your takeaway from reading this, Sal?
For me, though, this reads as a political end to a case because there's no merit. There's no merit to dismissing this case at all. It should have proceeded forward. Listen, they brought this case in in September of 2024. They were working on it for about a year. There's other circumstances and factors that go into it where there's co-defendants and co-conspirators and witnesses. So it's not like they could just snap their fingers like New York City Police Department and just grab a guy and indict him right away and it's over. So there's a lot of stuff that needs to get done. There's a lot of cogs in the wheel. So to say this was dismissed because it's, they're saying, well, there's prejudice in that the former head prosecutor, Damian Williams, wrote an op-ed, which I covered on my own show. And I got to tell you, it reads as basically a true indictment of the state. Forget about the city. But he never references any names. He's talking about the culture of the state and how there's so much corruption with politics and people in charge. They're saying that article that Damian Williams wrote is the basis of not prosecuting Eric Adams right now because he can't run the city. He can't run the city because he's highly corrupt and everyone around him is also. The police department, the fire department, to sanitation. I guess he moved Tish from sanitation to the police department. Everything he's touched has been corrupt. And he's hanging out with nefarious characters and in nightclubs and doing all kinds of other criminal acts there. So it's not an op-ed the reason why they're dismissing this case. They're dismissing it on political grounds, which is illegal. And, as a guy that was in law enforcement, I have a huge problem with this. I had a problem with Donald Trump's prosecution because that was political. He might be the only guy you can straight up say everything that they've tried to charge Trump with was political. You cannot say this in the Eric Adams case where people have now, as I've previously reported, have pled guilty and are witnesses in Eric Adams' case and pled guilty to parts of Eric Adams' indictment are now have a convicted felon. They're convicted felons, and now I guess the head guy in charge of everything is now walking because he knew someone in the President Trump inner circle. It stinks and reeks of high heaven of corruption. And for a guy who campaigned saying the guy in front of me, he's corrupt, Joe Biden, what are you, President Trump? You're letting a guy go that, by the way, has an 83 or 86% unfavorability in New York State.
That's an amazing rating. But wait a minute. Let me talk you down from the ledge for a second, Sal, because I know where you're coming from and I share your anger to a certain extent. But I think it is possible that it's not directly on Trump. Now, first of all, let's just talk about some of the points that you're raising, which I agree with completely. So just the other day, this was not even a week ago, okay, we had this filing from the U.S. attorneys in the Southern District of New York. February 7th, they wrote to Annalisa Torres, who's presiding over this case here with Mohammed Bahi, right? And also to Dale Ho, who's presiding over the Eric Adams case and another case with this guy, Erden Arkan, who I don't know, but sounds like he's from Turkey with that name.
Correct.
And they're basically saying that these guys are now, they're turning state's witnesses, make some kind of deal with the DOJ to testify against Eric Adams. So it seems quite odd to me, definitely not on the mind of the U.S. attorneys in the Southern District here. If they're issuing a document like this 5 days ago, it doesn't seem like they intend to dismiss this case. The other thing, and Eric and I were talking about this just before, the other thing that's super weird is that just as we were waiting to begin this broadcast, Sal, I think people who've been watching me on X are aware that I have been blowing out the Pacer bill and checking my Pacer account basically like every 5 minutes. And just before we came on here, there is a new document that's been added. I don't think we're going to be able to get any information on this document, even with the text turned on, because this thing, 117, which was added today, is filed under seal. Okay? So we see this letter from the other day, and then this sealed document that we just don't know what it is. And it's filed by Derek Wickstrom, who, he's one of the U.S. attorneys. So it seems like there is pushback coming from the U.S. attorneys. It's important that we remind the audience, nobody on this panel is a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. You guys are ex-cops, but not lawyers. So there's a lot of stuff here that maybe we don't understand. Eric, in any of your history as a cop, did you have cases you were involved in with sealed documents like this and mystery defendants? What do you think of all this?
Yes. Actually, in numerous cases, I've had cases where there were sealed documents where I was dealing with confidential informants and some substantial witnesses. So I've had numerous cases involving illegal firearms. And work in the South Bronx, a lot of our cases with illegal firearms went to the Southern District. Reason being to get the ultimate prosecution, because we had such a flood of guns stemming into the South Bronx that we were actually working with the Southern District. Actually worked great. Those cases had to be tight, but in many of those cases, we utilized confidential informants. And that's a key element, is to keep their identities secret, obviously to keep them safe and not to jeopardize the case. But other than that, I don't see any reason to have documents sealed. So to me, as you said, and I think that's great that you preface this, that we do not have law degrees, we're not attorneys, we're not esquires, but we make observations. And based on our anecdotal experience, typically, documents sealed are usually protecting witnesses. So to me, that's another indicative problem of this case. There's numerous layers to peel back here. And the problem that I ultimately have with this case is there's now no closure. And I put this on par, and I think, Jason, what you always talk about, I think what's unique is John, Sal, and myself, we have this unique ability to weave into our NYPD experience and reflect it upon what's going on with the politics and the culture of New York City. So I like to compare this to the bail reform. The reason why I do that is because when it comes to the bail reform, my argument has always been that you're not protecting the victim, but you're actually not rehabilitating and helping criminals stop their crimes to help them and prevent them from actually getting jail time. Because when we release someone without bail and we have substantial allegations and the preponderance of evidence is there that the crime was committed, we're now putting that criminal in a position to continue committing more crimes. And by the time they get to trial, we now have more cases. So we're actually going to put them in jail. So we're not empathizing with the criminals as much as the Democrats want us to believe. So I see it on par and on parallel with the Adams case, because now, without proceeding forward with charges, if any other actions are now taken by Adams, if there's any other appearance of impropriety, well, that is going to be a negative impact for Adams and his administration, but it's also going to be a negative impact for the Department of Justice because these actions, as we say, sometimes the blood is on their hands, but the dirt is on their hands and is on their fingernails. So I would, at this point, I expect and I would anticipate, and I think that Donald Trump should make a public announcement to protect himself, because if he doesn't, I believe this will be his Achilles heel.
Yeah, and I think that NBC News agrees with you. They're reporting that Eric Adams now owes Donald Trump. I mean, it's almost like they're admitting that this was a crooked thing to do and that we're just like openly acknowledging political horse trading. Sal, isn't that an outrageous headline for NBC?
Yeah, well, NBC, I know, is no fan of President Trump, but yes, like I said, a broken clock is right twice a day. When it comes to Eric Adams himself, who's probably the single most corrupt politician in the United States today, currently, since Joe Biden is now gone, this man has, like I keep reiterating, he has destroyed the lives of numerous people, many of them being Trump supporters. I myself being one. Right now, there are thousands of people that were terminated because they didn't go along with this mandate. They went to court. They won the right from a court, from a judge, to get back all their back pay, be reinstated, get their job back. And this is a workforce, remember, in New York City that is minuscule right now. It's very minute. It's actually getting smaller by the day. Nobody wants any jobs because he either terminated everyone and everyone left because he's so corrupt. So this is a problem that's going on, and these people should be rehired, but it is Eric Adams who continues to appeal that case over and over and over again. And in this bastion of people that were terminated are numerous Trump supporters that not only supported Trump once, but 3 times. They voted for him. And then they have to hear his son, Eric Trump, the guy's a builder. He's a real estate guy. He has no idea about anything criminally. I don't care how many times they subpoena him. He's never arrested anyone. He's never been in a courtroom trying to indict somebody or going through a court case like me or Eric or any cop or lawyer. He says, he said this on Sid Rosenberg's show, Eric Adams has been nice to my family. So in a selfish manner, you're saying we need to take care of this guy, even though he's destroyed the city and destroyed all my father's supporters. He completely forgets about all those people. Is making about himself and his own family. And that might be a window into who the Trumps really are. So these are things that people need to look at. Now, I'm not trying to sound like I have sour grapes. I'm not trying to sound like, now I'm an anti-MAGA guy. I'm just bringing you facts. These are facts, and they're right in your face. I was a cop, and what did we do? We went where the evidence led. Whether you liked the guy or not, or whether you liked what you were doing or you didn't like what you were doing, you need to look at evidence. These people love to pry on the low information voter and person. Why? They're easy to manipulate. There's one headline that's a false narrative that keeps being parroted, that Eric Adams came out against the Biden administration for the migrants. Right. Therefore, this is what, no. That is a parroted narrative for low information people. Eric Adams' indictment, everything that started with him was in early 2021 when he first began to raise money for his campaign. That's the first thing. Number 2, he was being investigated for the prior 10 years because apparently as Brooklyn Borough president, he had links with Tim Pearson back to Turkey and China through Winnie Greco. Okay, so this is a 10-year span that they looked at, which is when they indicted him in 2024, where there's a repeated pattern of behavior. There's campaign matching funds, which is a program that only New York City has. You get 8-to-1 on every $250. There are foreign straw donors. There is a link back to the Turkish government. So that was what they were looking at to begin with Eric Adams. So this false narrative that happens 3 years later, he said the city's going to be destroyed. It was Eric Adams who campaigned that he loved sanctuary cities. He wanted illegal immigrants to vote, which now is something that's come up this week. Eric Adams didn't veto that bill. It passed, and now the city is at war with the state because they're saying they want illegals to vote in the local elections. Now, it's illegal federally, but in a state like New York, could it pass for the law? I don't know. It was put into law by the city legislation. So this is a law Eric Adams was for. He did not veto it, and he came out in favor for it. So how is this guy now going to say, I'm going to deport people, which he's never made a move in 4 years as mayor about addressing illegal immigration. He campaigned that New York City was a sanctuary city. He welcomed everyone and everyone. He also was out there with a bus saying, well, Texas Governor Abbott doesn't want you. Come on, come on. I want you here in New York City. Okay. So he welcomed the program, and he said that New York City, the official position of New York City was that the border would to remain open. He said that. Everything he's done is in contradiction of what Trump's Justice Department has said. So very clearly, I mean, it's speculative, but you got to wonder if there's some kind of deal in the back. Is there money being exchanged? And Donald Trump will now slowly take the position in front of Eric saying, well, who's really corrupt here? What the hell is really going on? And I know it's hard, especially to these MAGA people that may or may not be in a cult or they're low information themselves, to actually fathom what I'm saying and say, wait a minute, maybe our God, our Jesus, which is ridiculous because no one should be praying to a human being or worshiping a human being. You worship God. God is your God, not Donald Trump, not Eric Adams, not Joe Biden. But to some people, it's opposite. You need to start questioning someone's motives. So as great as you're seeing everything that he's doing, this is in complete contradiction to everything he campaigned for, everything he has stated previously, and it goes against DOJ. I think they try to fine the city. They said there's money that you took for this sanctuary city stuff. So it's in complete contradiction to the Trump agenda. And if you're going to use him as a puppet, well, then you're a dictator. This is a third world country. And that's not what we voted for. I just pointing this out. You know, people need to take their head out of the sand. I know there's a big cheerleading section, but stop being low information and get informed real quick because you're going to lose the country or the city one way or the other if you continue down that path.
Absolutely. I appreciate your passion on this, Sal, and I detected you kind of tempering yourself in the beginning. I don't think you should do that. I saw our friend the Muppet, razzing you about the fact that you're coming out strong against this, but I disagree with his premise because, look, whether it's your best friend, your wife, your business partner, when somebody does something wrong and you get angry about it and express that anger, that to me is the natural reaction of an honest person. If you just say, well, I like this person, whether it's the president or your friend or whoever it is, and just give them a pass on every single thing that they do because you like them or you want to like them or you see them in the movies and see them on TV and think they're fantastic, that's an idiotic way to be. So I wouldn't let anything that stooge says bothers you. I know you don't need me to say that, but just for the audience to hear it and also to back up some of the things that you were saying about Eric Adams. Sure, you can go on TV and say, oh, the migrants are going to destroy New York City, but it's his NYPD that laughs in my face when I call them to say, hey, there appears to be some gang members trying to sell a baby outside of a hotel. He's not doing anything to stop that. He's just going on the news giving sound bites. I did not know that Eric Trump had said that. That was a really not smart thing for him to say, because whether or not Donald Trump is personally involved in this certainly creates the appearance. And, we've moved far away from this concept of conflicts of interest. You want to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest, which this thing certainly has.
Yeah, Jason, I'm going to tell you something here. And I said this, I believe, on the Finest Unfiltered. We did an emergency podcast the night that we learned about this letter from the DOJ. And Eric could back this up too. Here's the issue with this. You might not be able to do anything about it because, you're not allowed to question something from the DOJ. But what happens is the voters can. 2 years from now, almost a little less than that, it'll be 2 years from now, it'll be midterm elections, which is usually a rubber stamp on where the president is. And right now, the Democrats have nothing to go on. They keep rounding up, Trump is this, Trump is this, Trump is that. But right here, you have something. Right here, you have a corrupt mayor who's completely, compromised in every which way. And you have a president who campaigned that he was going to drain the swamp and all this stuff. But somehow his friends in his little circle, Steve Witkoff, no one even knows who the hell that guy is. He came out of nowhere to make all these peace deals in Gaza that real Israelis are not happy with that. Now you have misplaced people in Gaza Where are they going to go now? Because Europe doesn't want these people. So are they coming to New York City? You have a compromised mayor. He won't say no. So, and you have all these migrant shelters. So you could put them right there. They're migrants technically. So, you got to look at this and say, well, if I'm a Democrat, you're saying this prosecution is no good, but you seem corrupt because you are covering for this guy. And why? Why are you so involved and invested in Eric Adams out of nowhere? Now we see Steve Bannon floating around. You saw his lawyer, Artie Idala, cut him a sweet deal. Everybody else went to jail. He got 3-year probation, doesn't have to do any jail time, scamming people out of millions of dollars as the head guy in that. You got Boris Epstein. Somehow Boris Epstein is Trump's lead legal advisor. The guy is a mess. He's been arrested numerous times on camera. He's also got a law license, but has never tried a case in court. Listening to him would be like me listening to a recruit in a police academy and I have 20 years on. How is that guy who has no experience going to tell me with 20 years experience and been involved in numerous things, he knows more than me? That's what Boris does with other attorneys surrounding Trump. And also Boris is the one that's in Trump's ear with legal stuff. In fact, he got busted trying to sell his office, trying to say, well, Trump can appoint you if you pay me. That is also unethical and should be something you get disbarred over, but he is still around. And guess what? That's Steve Bannon's friend. And if there's anyone involved in this, whether it's speculative or not, it would be Boris, because he's the point man when it comes to the legal. And by the way, Emil Bove, the deputy attorney general here that wrote this letter, was brought in by Boris and is Boris's friend. So there's a whole connection right there. And that's in Trump's inner circle. Then we have the Steve Witkoffs of the world that invited Eric Adams in, and you're going, who the hell is Steve Witkoff? And this, if you surround yourself, you're starting to see that the people surrounding President Trump might be just as questionable as the Crumbs crew that was surrounding Eric Adams. You might see I don't see any political uplift carrying Eric Adams around if I'm President Trump. There is no upside to this. You cannot fix New York holding this guy as a puppet in your Geppetto. It just won't work. I'm sorry. This will come back around and bite him enormously. And in an election like the midterms, if I'm a Democrat, I use this to my advantage, and they still have one true trump card. The man that indicted Eric Adams is squeaky clean. The same guy they said that wrote that op-ed was no good, Damian Williams. And if he speaks up on what really went down here, you are finished. You're finished because he's squeaky clean. And you have a cast of characters surrounding Trump and all these guys with records and this and that and doing all shady stuff. But Damian Williams has never been alleged to do anything shady. He was the lead prosecutor. He's squeaky clean. So there's your strategy for the midterms if anyone's listening, because I think this will heavily haunt President Trump if he doesn't correct this. I would revoke that letter, to be honest, or have the SDNY do their evaluation and disregard it and say, this is absolutely corrupt, because that's the appearance. And if you took a poll in New York City right now, and I've heard a lot of people, the phone's blown up, they're calling left and right, and they don't agree with this. The MAGA camp that live in Wisconsin might, but not the people that in New York City have been affected by Eric Adams. I don't know. So, Eric, what's your take on that whole thing, what I just said, and what you're hearing here?
Well, you said a lot, but you said a lot of good stuff. And the bottom line is this: I think people with common sense look at this whole thing like, okay, what's the fiasco, right? What's going on here? And ultimately, when you think of Donald Trump, you think of the art of the deal, right? You're thinking, okay, what's the chess play behind this? And when we talk about chess, I always thought that Ingrid Lewis Martin, who was the right hand for Mayor Eric Adams, ran the chessboard. And I always said that, kind of I gave this analogy that if you look at a chessboard, that the queen has the ability to move up and down throughout the whole board. She can move diagonally, and she protects the king. So if you look at the political career of Eric Adams, Ingrid Lewis Martin has always been the brains behind the operation. She has been the confidant. And I thought that once she started getting probed in this corruption probe, that was checkmate for Eric Adams. He's the king of this operation. He can only move one step to the left, one step to the right. But now that Donald Trump, his Department of Justice, has dropped these charges, he no longer needs that queen. And to me, we've now created a far worse monster than we already have. Eric Adams is responsible for the state of New York City that it's in right now. The level of corruption, the appearance of propriety that we have right now It was so egregious that just your layman's person who's not paying attention to politics has been awoken by this. So what's going on with our city? It's not a place for business. It's not a place for public safety. This is a place where people are running and leaving for better pastures. So if we look at this case right now, we have to ask questions and say, well, we have a corruption probe going on with potential bribery. And the allegations in that indictment are so overwhelming that even Tiffany Caban, who's a far leftist, who's anti-police and anti-imprisonment, actually indicated that the indictment and the preponderance of evidence in that indictment is so overwhelming that you see guilt just in those statements, just in that indictment alone. So I feel that this past dropping the charges, we're not going to slow Eric Adams down. If anything, when someone has a criminal mastermind and they're winning, they don't stop. They feel, well, I'm winning, I'll just keep winning. And we heard that from Michael Dowd, a former police officer that ran a corruption ring. In 1993, he testified in what was known as the Mullen Commission. And he testified, he always felt, I'm winning. Right? He thought at some point I'm going to get caught and they'll stop me. But I just kept winning. And that's what I feel like it comes with Eric Adams. And then there's another door I'd like to talk about. And that's the connection to P. Diddy at this point. Diddy is at the center right now when we talk about these potential sex parties. Diddy right now is looking at a long period of time in jail. And Eric Adams gave him a key to the city. And there's no closure on that because we were asking questions. What is the connection from Eric Adams to Diddy? Does Eric Adams have any part in these sex parties? Is Eric Adams involved in any sexual assaults? And why would we think not? There's numerous sexual allegations surrounding this administration. Eric Adams himself is currently being sued in a sexual allegation. It's costing the city millions of dollars as the corporation counsel is utilized to indemnify Eric Adams and his cohorts in this corrupt criminal enterprise of administration that we have in New York City at this time. So I would be very careful with the Department of Justice because if something comes out and there's some type of sexual assaults or some type of sexual issues connecting and linking Eric Adams with Diddy, if there's a nexus, this is going to be a black eye for the Trump administration, especially this Department of Justice. So unlike a pardon, and I think this is actually far worse than a pardon, at least when it comes down to a pardon, we have closure. That case has been identified, and someone has done something to resonate themselves, to rejuvenate themselves, and we can give argument and show why they received the pardon. But in this, there's a lot of doors open, and at this point, there's a lot of questions. That's where I have a problem. And I said this before. I really believe this could be Trump's Achilles heel. I know there's a lot of people at this point that are very skeptical. They support Trump. I support Trump also, but he's not the Messiah. He is a public official, and public officials, unfortunately, make a lot of mistakes. And I hope this is not a mistake that's going to ruin his entire term in his second term, because we see the failure of COVID and we're seeing the second failure this time around. So I hope for better. Hopefully he has something up his sleeve. If he does, I just don't see it at this point. From my observations, I just can't see it. I'm really shocked also by his son, Eric Trump, because John McCary and myself and Sal Greco, we did an episode together as an emergency broadcast talking about these charges being dropped from the Department of Justice towards Eric Adams. And we brought up numerous videos where Eric Adams berates and just totally humiliates and tries to embarrass him. He Jason refers to him as a clown. And yet now Eric Trump is saying, oh, he actually treated us well. So I'm very curious what's going on. It's very strange.
Right.
I don't get it. Maybe someone else can tell me. At this point, I just don't see it.
Well, Eric, they want you to listen. This game is simple. They think you're dumb, stupid, and docile, and that you are just going to be a low information person. Low information. Vote for me. We're both the same skin color. Vote for me. We shop at the same store. It's the same thing over and over again. They don't have a brain. They don't like people who have a brain. That's why you, John McCarthy, and myself were never asked to go to any Trump event. I mean, basically, I had to go there. Why? Because we all know who my friend is, right? That's how I get in. It's not that Trump himself is saying, hey, I want to speak to Sal Greco. That guy makes a lot of sense, but he'll have every other sycophant there. Check out the list of Mar-a-Lago. There's a lot of felons showing up there, too. It's unbelievable. Nobody asks any questions. You know, you want to look at something and say, this is great, but you don't look over there and say, we have a problem. You're doing exactly what the other guy did. But it's all rosy because now you're in charge. You can't do that. This is not a dictatorship. And this is what gets people riled up. And that's why you need to stay in the middle. And I want to make another statement because in the other episode I had with Serena Townsend, who's also been on this show with me and Jason, we read out something. It was, I believe, the agreement that Mohammed Bahi had with the government. And in this agreement, he stated that this other Turkish donor guy, that Eric Adams, he went to this person's house and Eric Adams informed Mohammed Bahi, oh, well, listen, don't worry. You tell him, don't worry about the FBI. They won't see the cash. Now, that doesn't sound like a mayor. That sounds like a thug operating
That's
like
crazy.
a street boss. And
I hadn't seen that.
Yes, and he said, oh, there's no evidence of me and no one came forward. Everybody came forward. It's just this case isn't proceeding forward in a corrupt way of saying we don't need to see this because I want to use you as my Pinocchio and I'm Geppetto. We're going to call him President Geppetto for the moment. That is what this looks like. I mean, you cannot have this look. This is not, I mean, I'll almost say this is not what MAGA stands for. And you're starting to see a split. This is the article right here. And it says it. And that is disturbing. So you have a guy operating like a mob boss. We're hearing that he also threatened witnesses. And now he's got the DOJ behind him. Steve Bannon, Boris, probably the New York Young Republicans who are somehow involved with Eric Adams, apparently, or there's some shady dealings that we're hearing about in the background. There's never like a good allegation here. You never hear that, oh, well, Eric Adams did the right thing. You never hear that. It's always, you always hear something negative. Always. It's always something like, what the hell else is this guy involved in? If you check out my ex, I posted this morning, there was a article by, again, Eric Sanders, who's I'm not going to lie, he's my attorney, but he's got a bunch of cases where there was an instance where a bunch of cops from the 114th precinct basically did a false arrest, and guess who they contacted and was supposed to, I guess, say they were taking care of it or looking into this in situation. Eric Adams, the former chief of department, Jeffrey Madry, and the former chief of internal affairs, Miguel Iglesias, who is all surrounded in corruption. By the way, they're all frequenting the same nightclubs and doing all kinds of stuff together. They didn't do anything. No one was suspended. No one was modified. You had a false arrest. Jason, a police officer cannot pull you over and say you have dark tints. Write you this summons from the station house, never using a tint meter. You also have to have a tint meter. And while they effected this arrest, right, they didn't do a voided arrest. There's no voided arrest. There's no forced report. They beat this guy up unmercifully on camera, and it was because he had tinted windows. What they really did is overzealously, what we think, or I think, is that they thought there was going to be a gun in that vehicle or there was going to be something really bad. And it wasn't. So there's another instance, and Eric Adams' hands are all involved in it because he got a phone call because the person they arrested, their father was a first-grade retired detective, and the mom was also a retired cop. And they just so happened to be friends of Eric Adams. How do you let that occur? It was a total beatdown. There were cops on video that showed up that wanted nothing to do with that, and you could see it. And this is why we point out and say, this is what's wrong in the New York City Police Department. That's what needs to be rooted out. But Eric likes that. Eric, who said he wasn't for stop, question, and frisk, is now the captain of stop, question, and frisk, back to the old ways. He likes the way things were. He said he was against it. And that's what you're seeing today. All the mismanagement is led by the mayor. He somehow is involved in everything in New York City Police Department, every major decision. He is the true de facto police commissioner. And that's fine, but then don't have one because he's trying to create a buffer when things go wrong and say, no, blame him. I'll fire him.
Right.
I'll fire her.
I'm glad we're talking about this now, Sal, because I have only been picking up little pieces of what you've been laying down for the past day or two. And I will admit, I was feeling like, well, maybe Sal's overreacting a little bit. But now that I'm listening to you explain this all, you've convinced me you're not overreacting at all. This reaction is completely appropriate. The only thing that sticks in my mind, because you're telling us about Boris Epstein and some of these Emil Bove and some of these people that I didn't know all these details about, and it's good insight. I think we need to understand more about that. We've seen some questionable lawyers around Trump in the past. Michael Cohen, why is he working with these guys? But let me take you guys back to this letter for a minute, because again, we're not lawyers, but we can look at this and we can kind of start to observe, like Eric said, we can make observations. So you read this morning, but I just want to go through this again here. So this is the letter from Emil Bove to the U.S. attorneys at the Southern District of New York, saying that they're directed, as authorized by the Attorney General, to dismiss the pending charges in the Eric Adams case as soon as practicable, which is a stupid thing to say, but lawyers love to say that kind of stuff, subject to the following conditions. This is what I want to focus on. The defendant must agree in writing to dismissal without prejudice. The defendant must agree in writing that he is not a prevailing party under the Hyde Amendment, and that the matter shall be reviewed by the confirmed U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York following the November mayoral election. Now, this is another one of these weird things where they've kind of, gotten out of Eric Adams' way to allow him to run for mayor. They seem to be mimicking this DOJ policy of not interfering with the presidential election within 60 days. They've now extended it to, 6 months or whenever November is coming. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? And while we're discussing it, first, Eric, what do you think about this? And let me look up what this Hyde Amendment is. Yeah.
Well, I think at this point is the only thing that I see that's actually common sense, logical when it comes to this particular letter is the subject in it, right? The fact that it's going to be dropped without prejudice, right? Because if at some point this case needs to move forward, that they can because it's without prejudice. So at this point, I think that's logical. Where the subject says, if we show here, what it's dismissal without prejudice of prosecution of Mayor Eric Adams. That's a key element. So that's the only thing I see at this part that actually makes sense is the fact that we could proceed forward with charges. But the problem is appearance of impropriety is important, especially in the New York City administration. It's ironic, and to me, it's a paradox that Eric Adams has touted this ideology, perception versus reality. And it's the same thing goes when it comes to these charges. It's perception versus reality. We've now allowed the first indicted mayor of New York City to now run for re-election. These allegations have not played out. And you know what? Shame on Eric Adams at this point also, because if I was a public servant, in which I was working for the New York City Police Department, if I was accused of a crime, I would want my day in court. I would want my day in court to show that I'm innocent of all these charges, especially when you're the mayor of New York City and publicly you said, I tell my people to follow the law. But Eric Adams is a magician. He's a hell of a character. He does a great job of deflecting, distracting, and diverting the attention of New York City people. I have to give credit to Sal Greco when he says low information people. And Eric Adams was voted and elected based on low information people. Unfortunately, the apparatus of New York City is voter apathy. And it took Eric Adams less than 500,000 people in a city of over 8.5 million people occupied to get elected in his primary. Think about that, less than 500,000. So right now, as we see this push for illegal military age males to vote in New York City, that equates to votes for Eric Adams. And Eric Adams could potentially become the mayor of New York City again. And if that happens, and if more allegations surface, if we have some whistleblowers out there that start to come to the surface, we have a problem for the Department of Justice. It's going to be a failure, not just for New York City, but for the entire nation. And we also have to ask the question. The question is this. What happens to all the other cases right now that are being probed, that have a nexus and a direct link to Eric Adams? Eric Adams appointed the police commissioners in New York City. Unlike some other counties in this country where they're elected sheriffs, elected officials, Eric Adams appointed the police commissioner for New York City. The former commissioner, Ed Caban, is under a federal probe along with his twin brother for racketeering in bars around New York City. Eric Adams has a direct link because we had what was referred to as a March program, and he switched it to what's called Cure. So it's very suspicious and scrupulous behavior to put such an action. March, it stands for It's a multi task force where the police department would coordinate. It's an acronym, but they would coordinate with the fire department, Department of Health, and they would respond to restaurants and bars, and they would do enforcement to make sure that these bars are not having disorderly conduct, we're not having violent crimes stemming from nightlife, in which we had. But Eric Adams disbanded that and moved to what's called Cure. The ideology with Cure was that there wouldn't be enforcement; there would be an opportunity for these bars to communicate with the commanding officers of these precincts and not have enforcement. It would be more communication. And to me, it's impeccable the timing that this was implemented while our former commissioner is being probed by the feds. So there's a lot of information. There's a lot of.
But what do you mean, Eric?
Here.
What does that indicate to you?
So
that they formed
initially,
this?
So initially with the March program, when you have these task force and these multi-agencies respond to these community hotspots, they do enforcement. But when we move to this Cure program and having communication, there's no enforcement action taken. So it's right now what is being alleged is that the twin brother to the former commissioner Ed Caban, his name is James Caban, actually had contracts out at different bars and say, hey, if you give me a certain amount, you give me a stipend, that no one's going to respond. And no matter what allegations are there or any complaints, we'll take care of it with my brother, the commissioner. And that allows it also because we only have the police department dealing with these restaurants and bars through the Cure program. Unlike where we had before, we had checks and balances. It was the police department, the fire department, the Department of Health working together to do these inspections. But now this falls just on the police department. And now we have a sole agency communicating with these bars. So it alleviates these other agencies involved and allows, if this comes out true, for the former commissioner and his brother to make connections at these bars and restaurants.
Wow, so it sounds like you're telling us that they basically just created a committee to shake down these bars and get rid of the fire department or anybody else who's not on board with their criminal plan.
That's exactly what these allegations are.
Wow.
And I'm sure Sal could even play, we've talked about this extensively on the podcast. And at this point, this is what holds in the balance. While Eric Adams is getting a pass, we could potentially have an act of corruption going on with the police department.
Wow.
While Eric Adams is running for re-election.
Holy cow. So now wait a minute. Let me take you guys back here because we've now found out something here about this Hyde Act and its Hyde Amendment. And it's strange too. I never heard of it before, but it's got to do with using federal funds for elective abortions. And look at this. January 24th, I didn't hear Trump reading about this with ex-Musk picking his nose. This is maybe one of the lesser known executive orders, but for nearly 5 decades, the Congress has annually enacted the Hyde Amendment and similar laws that prevent federal funding of elective abortion, reflecting a long-standing consensus that American taxpayers should not be forced to pay for that practice. So this is what they want Eric Adams to agree that he's not going to involve himself in. It seems a strange caveat for him to. We got to read that letter again. What the hell did it say about the Hyde Act? It says he's going to agree in writing to dismissal without prejudice. That's important. That means that when the appointed person comes in, they're going to look at this more carefully. He's got to agree that he's not a prevailing party. This is confusing. We need a lawyer to tell us what this means. What does that mean, that he's not a prevailing party under the Hyde Amendment? What could that possibly have to do with abortion? And the matter shall be reviewed. So see, the thing that I'm wondering, guys, because definitely, Sal, I feel that your anger is not at all misplaced. Eric, I think you've just now introduced a lot of insights that, again, every time I talk to you guys, you're telling me some kind of detail about the subtleties of this and the way the NYPD works and everything that I don't think people necessarily know. But to see, the thing that I'm seeing is it almost feels like with Alex Spiro and Eric Adams doing all these press conferences, it seems to me most lawyers are really kind of like risk averse and they don't want to do things like come out and make announcements about things until they're absolutely sure that all the dots are, all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. There's something very rushed about them coming out and celebrating and having these press conferences before we have the documents filed on the docket. And then now, of course, we have this very mysterious sealed document 117. The question now, Sal, becomes, we were talking before we went on, this is not a motion for voluntary dismissal pursuant to the criminal, the federal rules of criminal procedure, Rule 48A. This is sealed document. So if the SDNY was like, yeah, okay, this is reasonable, let's do what they're saying in that letter, they would have just issued, and by the way, it's a boilerplate motion that basically just says, pursuant to federal rules of criminal procedure, Rule 48A, we are voluntarily dismissing this case, and then the judge has to either say okay or no. And if the judge says no, there's going to be a very good reason. They would almost always say okay. But we don't have that here. We have a sealed document. And I'm really suspecting that this is something coming from somebody, one of these U.S. attorneys saying, hey, by the way, there's a huge problem, perhaps, with some of the guys. I don't know, Boris and Emil, but I mean, Sal, you brought up a lot of good points. What do you think? Sealed document.
I tell you what it could be also is the agreement or something that has to do with Eric signing these documents saying, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. It could be that also. The easiest thing with Eric Adams would be the just plea. Get out of the way. I mean, this is so...
But wait a minute. Wouldn't that be an exhibit if we're entering our letter of dismissal, and then here's an attachment that we're moving to file under seal? This is weird. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I can't say I've been in court 40 years and I've never seen anything like this. I've only been in court 8 years and I'm not a lawyer. But this it's some stench coming from this docket, Sal.
I could tell you this too. You could also have a huge uprising where everybody just says, we are going forward. We don't care what Emil Bo says. Yes. And then you could have a crisis. And then what happens is everybody starts... You can either get terminated or fired, but that could cause you to lose the entire office. There could be a complete uprising. I don't know.
Rebellion, right.
If I was in the SDNY, I mean, I don't know how their money situation is, but if they start to say X, Y, and Z, I would definitely sit there and say, you know what? I'm just going to resign. Let's see how they all do with all these different cases, because then you're going to have a real crisis on your hands. Because why are you protecting this one guy in the grand scheme of things? Is he really big on a national level? No. But what are you protecting him for? Because first, this guy campaigns on one thing and now he's doing the complete opposite. And for whatever reason, he's protecting a guy who has links to this, these cronies around President Trump. Some guy, Wickoff, we never knew who this guy was until recently. And now, boom, he's back on the playing field, even though everyone and everything around them has completely collapsed.
Now, Sal, sorry to interrupt you, but did you get a chance? I haven't seen this. I just noticed that this happened right before we came on, but Alex Spiro now had a press conference 2 hours ago. He says the case is over. He's declaring victory. I mean, doesn't this sort of seem like a very shystery way to sort of jam a deal down somebody's throat when maybe it's not completely over and they're out making all of this smoke and fire and big public things so that maybe they're hoping people will be embarrassed and not be able to walk this back? This is like fast talking somebody, isn't it?
Yeah, he's trying to deny the claim that Eric Adams is now a puppet, which clearly he is. This is Spiro at his best. This is what he does, but he's another guy. He charges $2,000 an hour, and this is what you get for him.
But wait a minute. He says there is no looming threat. Doesn't that contradict what we're reading? If they're saying that it still needs to be approved by somebody who hasn't been, confirmed in the Senate yet, or it still needs to be approved, in 2025. He's telling us what he is trying to stipulate as reality. Correct. He says there is no looming threat, but there absolutely is a looming threat.
Correct. And he says it's not a real case, but you heard from witnesses that have already pled guilty that it's a very serious case, and that there's people that were threatened and told, and there's browbeating involved, and that is a serious thing. He's saying it's a formality, but there's no response from the Southern District of New York. There's no 48-1A1 article of dismissal written. And again, it has to go through the judge. There's many different steps. This guy is just pounding his chest. He's brought in, he's a good media hype guy. He's trying to try the case again through the media. But the media doesn't pick up on the most obvious question. Mr. Spiro, There are defendants that are now witnesses that were co-conspirators with your client that stated how they did acts because your client told them to do it. And on top of it said, don't worry, when the FBI is there, they won't find the cash.
That's crazy. That's insanity.
Tell me, how do you explain that? And listen, the reason I go crazy is, you're right. You see these awards behind me. I mean, I was a cop. This is kind of stuff that you would resign over, saying, I didn't sign up for this. There is no law. That's what you're saying. The law only applies to little Joe and little Jane that jaywalk the street and get arrested. They have to go to jail. They're poor.
Well, and to Sal and to Eric and to Jason, but not to Mr. Adams or anybody who's friends
Mr. Adams knows some cronies, some lowlifes that are in Trump's inner circle. Therefore, he'll get away with everything. As close to murder as you could get. It's bribery. It's foreign national stuff. This is as close as you get to something that's as severe as a murder, because he stole from everyone, including the New York City taxpayers. And in fact, the Campaign Finance Board said they want their money back. Okay, that's how serious this was. But that guy gets away with it because he knows the right people, which is what he accused Joe Biden of doing, right? All these pre-pardons, all this stuff. But now you, in a current case that has merit, there is no merit to let go of this case and dismiss it. You are stepping in and saying, oh, let it go for political purposes. But if little Joe and Jane even step out of the way and get arrested for anything and don't know anyone, they're gone. They're facing 20 years. That's what people did not vote for. And if you put this up, and this is some kind of election issue, whether it's the midterms, president, governor, mayor, you will lose. The people will lose their minds saying, oh my God, what am I voting for? Because that could be me. That could be you. And that's why New York City people should be up in arms in front of the courthouse, in front of the city hall, screaming that this is wrong and they want this thing shut down. Who the hell is Emil Bove to try to step in for this? And if this is Trump, good luck, because in 2 years, you'll end up losing the House, and then probably you get impeached for a third time. That'd be a new record. You'll get impeached if they take over the House again, the Democrats, just on this issue alone. This one issue would crush any kind of legacy and agenda you have. And it's all for what? Somebody's getting paid behind the scenes and they're in his ear.
Well, we don't know that. We don't know that. And I don't disagree with you, Sal.
It's a good speculation and a good theory, just looking at the clowns surrounding each character here, whether it's Eric, Trump, or his lawyer, or whoever it is. Just speculating on that alone can lead to a lot of different theories. But
Jason, can I add something?
Yes, please.
Can I add something? Sure. So you really piqued my interest because I'm not familiar with the Hyde Act, and I spent a lot of time in my career searching Supreme Court cases. My job was getting illegal firearms was based on Supreme Court cases. I always worked on the People versus the Board, which is intrusive police work. So I'm looking at it right now, the Hyde Act. I've been looking it up. It's quite interesting to me. So I'm going to make a conjecture, just completely opinion based on that letter. So I think it has to do with illegal military age males. It has to do with these migrants. Because basically what it says is that in states where abortion is legal and women are provided Medicaid, that there will be no federal funding for that. So I think this might be tied to the migrant crisis, maybe saying that, hey, we don't want federal funds going for illegal military age males or migrants for abortions of such. That might be some type of agreement. I think that's where I'm trying to make the nexus right now. Because it says among the 36 states that do not ban abortion, 19 states in D.C. follow the Hyde Amendment Act. And 17 states use state funds to pay for abortions. It says here, today, 35% of women ages 15 to 19 covered by Medicaid live in states where abortion remains legal, but the program will not cover the service except for limited Hyde circumstances. So I think there's a connection to the migrant crisis, I would think, at this point.
It's a complicated thing. I don't know what that is. They're asking if he's a prevailing party. It says a prevailing party in the Hyde Amendment is a party that has won a dismissal or obtained. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. We're going to have to ask some of our lawyer friends what the hell that's talking about. But Before we wrap it up, because we're almost out of time, guys, and again, I don't disagree with what Sal is saying. Some people are asking why he's so angry. It's because Sal understands this better than most people, and it's not this, breezy nonsense that they've been saying in sound bites on the news or the type of stuff that Eric Trump is talking about. But let me just point out this one detail that just came out in this Alex Spiro article 2 hours ago that maybe we haven't seen yet. The acting U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Danielle Sassoon, has not responded to Bove's memo, not publicly. A spokesperson for the office declined to comment. So this all kind of supports what we're speculating about here, which is a brewing mutiny in the Southern District of New York. I suspect, guys, and we don't know, but what Sal is telling us about these various attorneys around Trump, it's got to be incredibly difficult when you're the president of the United States. Look, when you're in charge of anything, when I was the director of photography on a movie, and there were small movies that I was the director of photography on, there's sometimes people in the camera department doing stuff that you don't know about. The director on the movie I was the cinematographer for embezzled $2 million from a $6 million movie, and it took us almost a year to figure that out. So I just wonder if it's not possible that these people have insinuated themselves around Trump and are making deals of their own and convincing Trump. I'm not trying to defend the guy. I just don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And when I see stuff like this, like the U.S. attorney, she didn't come out right away and say, it doesn't seem like everybody is on board with this. We'll just wrap up with responses to that. Sal, what do you think?
Well, I say this. I guess people saying things in the comments, so I don't know what they're saying, but I'm going to say this. Take away the passion. Take away the feelings. What do we have here? You say this is political? Did he commit a crime? Yes or no? The answer is yes.
Yes.
Are the crimes egregious? Once again, the answer is a yes. Did the people that were his co-conspirators and defendants in this case, did they not plead guilty to the same charges or charges in conjunction with the Eric Adams indictment? The answer is yes. So you need to ask yourself, why is Eric Adams special, and what is the purpose of trying to save a guy who not only is guilty here, and it will be found guilty in 5 minutes in a court or maybe a week because of all the defendants and evidence against him, but what is it that is holding back a Republican president, may I add, to curry favor with a little guy who's a slime ball in all of this, Eric Adams, but he seems to rub elbows with guys in Trump world as well. And you have to wonder, do they have a business interest with him as mayor and whatever else is going on? Take your feelings out. I never did things on feelings as a cop. You have to go where the facts lead you. And that's why I'm passionate, because the facts scream corruption, guilt. Corruption, guilt. All I keep seeing over and over again. I'm sure Eric could equate to this and say the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is how that I leverage and make my analysis when it comes to crime. So I ask myself, are there victims here? If it's a victimless crime, I think it's something that charges could be dropped and looked at a later time, but depending on how much evidence has been gathered or intelligence to make a case and get that closure. To me, that would make sense. But in this case, we do have victims, and the victim is New York City. New York City has been the victim of a failed administration by Eric Adams. We have an active corruption probe going on of the NYPD and other agencies of New York City at this point under Eric Adams. That affects New York City. That affects the taxpayer. It's affected public safety. It's affected the appearance of New York City. It's affected businesses. No longer is it a viable place to have a business. Marijuana was legalized in New York City. We have a sheriff who's a crony of Eric Adams. His name is Sheriff Miranda, for your audience, if they're curious. Who's conducting, think about this, this is America. His agency is conducting warrantless searches at marijuana shops in New York City without a court order. They're going in these locations. They're taking product, which they're referring to as contraband. Contraband is being destroyed in the public eye on TV as Eric Adams does press conferences. There's no chain of custody. It's never documented.
He's sniffing.
Yeah, he's sniffing. Exactly. We have the mayor, the first indicted mayor, sniffing marijuana in the public eye, and then telling you, hey, when I was a kid, I used to make 8 joints out of it. Telling you how many joints he makes out of marijuana. And then Sheriff Miranda, who's appointed by Eric Adams. This is quite different. We're not talking about LA sheriffs, where counties are different and elected by the people. Appointed by Eric Adams. This product is destroyed on TV with a warrantless search, and Sheriff Miranda testifies to the New York City Council that they don't have a chain of custody and they don't have accountability for the funds seized, if any. And then miraculously, a day or two later, Sheriff Miranda finds approximately $150,000 cash unaccounted for. This is, can we even say that this is an appearance of impropriety? That's corruption on its face. If you worked for the NYPD as a police officer, Sal Greco, or myself as Lieutenant Special Assignment, or John McCarry as a lieutenant, and if you couldn't account for 50 cents, you would be facing the arm of the district attorney's office. And we have no accountability under Eric Adams. So the question is, and what's the impact? If we drop the charges, were there victims, and could there be more victims? And the answer is yes. Would we allow a potential rapist? I know that we're comparing oranges to apples, but would we allow a potential rapist to stay in a position where they could potentially conduct more rape? Would we keep a teacher at a school that has allegations of touching kids? Will we say, oh, let's keep them at the school? That's what we're doing with Eric Adams. Eric Adams has cost the taxpayer money, and we're going to put him and keep him in the same spot and continue to cost more taxpayer money, funding illegal military age males that have allowed Tren de Aragua, which is a gang, penetrate New York City. The entire country comes from eight countries in South America, from the spoils of jail. And this is not your average gang. This is a gang that has $15 million that, if this is not addressed properly, could affect this country for decades. So I want to thank you, Jason, for always having us on here. Thank you, Sal, for your insight. I appreciate it. And thank you to your audience. I appreciate it. If they have any questions, I don't know if we have time, but tell your audience I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I know everybody loves hearing from you guys, and it's just always tremendous insights that are coming out. We're going to stay on top of this, and we'll do more shows as we figure out what the hell is going on. But I definitely think there's pushback coming from the SDNY, and hopefully the people who can make the decisions about this will hear what you guys are saying and consider these insights, and maybe there's still hope. I mean, that motion under 48A has not appeared yet, so until it does, the case is not being dismissed. So we'll stay on top of it. Until then, make sure everybody listens to the finest unfiltered podcast and follows Eric and Sal. Don't forget, you can support Crowdsource the Truth by going to odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth. You can still use your normal credit card until the end of February, and then they're switching to some new payment plan. But you can also go to crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. People are asking us, why can't Eric Adams be impeached? In New York City, I believe the only way a mayor can be removed is by the act of a governor. Maybe you guys know better than me. How can the New York City mayor be removed?
The governor, and there's a special commission in the city council, be 5 people, and they will convene, and if they all vote or the majority vote, then he would be removed as the mayor.
It's not happening, any of that, I don't think. But no. We'll be back soon to talk about more of this stuff. Sal, Eric, everybody watch.